She worked on the 4th floor of Okafor Medical Center for 3 years, and in all that time, no one who passed her in that corridor ever asked her name. They called her the lab clerk, or sometimes just the girl with the files. The new department head called her that one twice in the same meeting, and the second time, she had already learned not to correct him. Ada Nwosu needed the job. So she answered to whatever they gave her. But the night she refused to sign off on a DNA result she knew was wrong, a result that would have handed a dying man's inheritance to the wrong family, wiping out 27 years of someone else's rightful claim. That was the night the building stopped being able to ignore her. They said she was overstepping. One senior technician laughed so hard, he had to grip the edge of the reception desk to steady himself. A manager told her to go back to her filing cabinet and leave real science to real scientists. Another simply said, "You do not know your level, my dear." She left the room. She did not leave the building, and 3 weeks later, in the 7th floor boardroom, with 43 people sitting in silence and a DNA report that no one in that room had prepared themselves for, the people who had laughed the loudest could not look at her. Because the woman they had spent 3 years reducing to a job title and a corridor, the one they called that one, she was not who any of them had assumed, and neither, it turned out, was she. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop your city in the comments below. We want to know where this story is finding you tonight. Get comfortable. Get your popcorn. Because what happened to Ada Nwosu will make you think twice before you look past someone ever again. 3 years is long enough to learn a building. Long enough to know which elevator doors close before you reach them. Which supervisor's footsteps sound different when there is trouble. Which smile from the front desk means nothing is fine. Ada Nwosu had learned all of it. She had learned the building the way quiet people learn things. Not by being told, but by watching. She arrived every morning at 7:43, not because her shift started at 8, but because being early had never once cost her anything. She clocked in, changed into her uniform in a storage room, because the female staff bathroom was technically under renovation for the past 6 months, and no one had filed a complaint. And then she climbed to the 4th floor. Not by elevator. The 4th floor elevator required a key card that the lab department had not been allocated since the building restructuring 18 months ago. The stairs were fine. Ada's legs were fine. She managed the lab records for Okafor Medical Center. That was what her contract said. In practice, she filed samples, tracked test results, corrected entry errors before they reached the senior technicians, and answered the phone in a voice that every caller said sounded extremely professional, which was how she knew the callers had never seen her desk, which was in the corridor outside the actual lab, because the lab itself had run out of internal desk space 2 years before Ada was hired. She did not complain. She had tried complaining once, in her first month. The department head had looked at her the way you look at a car alarm going off at midnight. Not alarmed, just irritated, waiting for it to stop. So Ada stopped. Her mother had been sick for 4 years by the time she got the job. Not the sudden kind of sickness that arrives on a Tuesday and gives you 3 weeks to say goodbye. This was the slow kind. The kind that empties savings accounts one at a time. The kind where you wake up in the morning and the first thought in your head, before you have even opened your eyes, is a number. 4,700,000 naira. That was the number on her mother's hospital invoice after the first surgery. It was the number Ada had been carrying for 8 months before she understood that she would be carrying it, long after her mother stopped being able to see her carry it. Her mother died on a Thursday in November. The week after the funeral, Ada went back to work. She needed the job. She still needed it. Okafor Medical Center was not just a hospital. It was the flagship property of Okafor Medical Group, which was one of 4 subsidiaries of Okafor Holdings. a company that owned, among other things, 2 pharmaceutical distribution networks, a chain of diagnostic centers across 4 states, and a controlling stake in a mid-size insurance firm. The man who ran all of it was 34 years old. His name appeared on every employee badge, on the lobby signage, on the letterhead of every warning letter that had ever been slipped under Ada's department door. Dare Okafor. Ada had seen him in person twice before the night. Everything changed. The first time he walked through the 4th floor during a compliance inspection and did not look at her. The second time, he walked through the 4th floor during another compliance inspection and did not look at her. She had begun to understand that, to Dare Okafor, she existed the way the corridor existed, as a surface to pass through, not a person to encounter. That was fine. Ada was not there to be seen by Dare Okafor. She was there to manage the lab records. She was there to pay back 4,700,000 naira. The night it all began was a Wednesday. Ada was working the late shift because Clement, the junior technician supposed to cover Wednesday evenings, had called in sick for the 4th Wednesday in a row, and everyone had quietly agreed to stop mentioning it. It was 11:18 at night. The corridor was quiet. The only light still on in her section was her desk lamp, and the only sound was the soft print click of the thermal printer producing the day's final batch of results. She almost missed it. The results were for a battery of tests on patient file 0047NW. A man named Emmanuel Eze, 71 years old, admitted 3 days earlier from Abuja for a secondary evaluation. She had processed dozens of his files over the past week. She knew his case the way you know a familiar route, not because you studied it, but because you have traveled it enough times that your hands know the turns. So when the DNA comparison report came off the printer and she read it, something in her hands stopped. She read it again. Then a third time, the genetic markers for paternity had been inverted. Someone, at the data entry stage, almost certainly, had transposed 2 columns in the comparison table. The result, as printed, showed Emmanuel Eze as having no biological connection to the person being tested as his heir. The actual data, read correctly, showed the opposite. Ada sat very still. 11:23 p.m. The printer had stopped. The corridor was quiet. She thought about Clement calling in sick for the 4th Wednesday. She thought about the 4,700,000 naira. She thought about the department head and the look he had given her the one time she tried to raise an issue. Then she thought about Emmanuel Eze, 71 years old, lying in the ward 3 floors above her, and the family that would receive this result tomorrow morning and use it to determine who inherited everything the man had spent his life building. She picked up the phone and called Dr. Samuel Adebayo. Dr. Samuel was the senior physician overseeing the inheritance evaluation case. He was 52, soft-spoken in the way of a man who had decided long ago that clarity did not require volume. He answered on the 3rd ring. Dr. Samuel, sir. Good evening. This is Ada from the Lab Records Department on the 4th floor. I am sorry to disturb you at this hour, but there is a column transposition in the DNA comparison report for patient 047NW. The error reverses the paternity finding. If this result goes out tomorrow morning, it will say the opposite of what the data actually shows. Silence on the line. You are certain? He said. I have checked it 3 times, sir. I can send you the raw data file and the printed report side by side. The discrepancy is visible immediately. How long have you been looking at this? Since 11:21, sir. A pause. Then, send me the files. Do not let that report leave the department tonight. I will speak to the department head first thing in the morning. Ada sent the files. She set the report aside with a note clipped to the front in red ink. Hold. Pending review A. End was you. Then she sat down, turned off her desk lamp, and sat in the dark for a moment. Not because she was being dramatic, just because she was tired and it was 11:29 at night, and her legs ached from the stairs. She went home at midnight. She came back at 7:43 the next morning. By 9 a.m., the department head had been informed. By 9:45, there was a meeting in the conference room, one Ada was not invited to. She could hear voices from her desk in the corridor. She heard distinctly a laugh. Then another. At 10:15, the department head came to stand at her desk. He crossed his arms. This was his posture for conversations he had already decided the outcome of. You sent internal lab data to Dr. Adebayo last night without authorization. I flagged an error in a patient result, sir. The data was relevant to the case. I sent it to the physician in charge. You are a lab records clerk. Yes, sir. Records clerks do not make clinical judgments. I did not make a clinical judgment, sir. I identified a data entry error. The column structure for paternity comparison is standardized across all WHO-certified reporting formats. The transposition was clear. I know what you are going to say. He leaned slightly forward. In this department, errors are handled internally, by the people who are qualified to handle them, not by. He looked at her desk, at the filing trays, at the thermal printer, at the red ink note still clipped to the held report. Not by whoever is managing the filing cabinet. Are we clear? If that report had gone out as printed, Ada said, Mr. Emmanuel Aza's biological heir would have received a negative paternity finding. An estate would have passed to the wrong person. That is not a filing error, sir. That is someone's entire life. The department head stared at her for 3 full seconds. It was the longest he had ever looked directly at her. His face held the particular expression of a man encountering a level of stillness he did not know how to negotiate. Know your level, he said quietly, and he walked back to the conference room. The laugh she had heard earlier, she understood now it had been about her. Ada turned back to her desk. She straightened the pen she kept beside the printer. She did not cry, because the corridor was not a private place, and the renovation on the bathroom had not moved in 6 months. What Ada did not know, sitting at that desk in the corridor on the 4th floor, was that Dare Okafor was in the building that morning. Not for an inspection. He had come because his grandfather had called him at 6 a.m. and told him to come. And Dare Okafor, whatever else he was, did not ignore his grandfather's calls. He took the stairs from the lobby because the 7th floor elevator was under maintenance, and the signage directing people to the alternate route was small, and placed in a corner that assumed you already knew where you were going. The stairs from the lobby came out on the 4th floor. He came through the stairwell door and walked past a woman moving in the opposite direction, her head down, carrying a stack of files thick enough to cover her chin. She stepped sideways without looking up. Sorry, sir. He had already moved past her when he heard the department head's voice from down the meeting room, the door half open. He heard the word filing. He heard the laugh. Then he heard very clearly 2 words. Know your level. He did not go in. He continued toward the other stairwell, but on the landing, he stopped. He stood still for a moment. Then he took out his phone and sent a message to his personal assistant. Pull the full incident report for the 4th floor lab records department. This morning. Every detail. He went to see his grandfather. Chief Joseph Okafor was 78 years old and had not been well since August. Not dramatically unwell. Not the kind that sent people rushing to bedsides, but the slow, consolidating kind of a man whose body was quietly renegotiating its. His doctor had used the phrase manageable with care. Chief Okafor had translated this as, I have time, but not as much as I would like. He had been using the time thinking about Dare. Dare was his grandson, his son's only child, the person who had absorbed the Okafor Holdings Board by the age of 31 and run it without visible effort for 3 years since. He was also, as far as Chief Okafor could determine, deeply alone. Not lonely in the way people talk about. Alone in the other way, the way where you come home and the building is quiet, and that is simply correct. No one waiting, no conversation expected, The quiet as a natural state, not an absence. Chief Okafor did not think this was correct. When Dare arrived at the examination room that morning, the old man was still in his agbada, which his doctor had been trying to get him to change out of for 20 minutes. He looked up when Dare came in and smiled the specific smile he kept for his grandson. Not the public smile, not the patriarchal smile, the real one. The one that still made Dare feel, at 34, like he was 7 years old and had arrived somewhere safe. "You came," the old man said. "Of course I came." Dare spoke with the doctor. The summary was the same. Blood pressure elevated, pattern worsening slowly, medication managing but not solving, stress reduction essential. The old man waved this away as if it were someone else's problem. Then, when the doctor stepped out, Chief Okafor looked at Dare directly. "You said that the last time," he said. Dare, who had not said anything yet, understood immediately. "I am fine, Grandpa." "You said that the last time also, because it was true." "Dare." The old man's voice did not rise. It never rose. It simply changed register, became the voice that had settled disputes in boardrooms 40 years ago. The voice that 8-year-old Dare had understood meant this conversation is not optional. "I am not asking about your health. I am asking whether you are happy. Those are not the same question." Dare looked at the wall. Outside the window, the city was going about its Wednesday. Indifferent, continuous. "I am managing," he said. He heard it as he said it, heard how it sounded. The old man heard it too. He said nothing more. He just looked at his hands on his knees and thought something privately that he did not share. The incident report reached Dare's phone at 2 p.m. He read it in his car in the basement garage. He read it twice. He read the name at the bottom, A. Nwosu. He put the phone down on the seat beside him and thought about the stairwell. The woman with the files who had stepped aside without looking up. The laugh from the conference room. The 2 words that had followed him up the stairs. He sent a second message to his PA. "Schedule a full staff department meeting for lab records, 4th floor. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. I will chair it." His PA responded in 40 seconds. "Noted, sir." Ada was told about the meeting at 4 p.m. She wrote it on a post-it note and stuck it to the edge of her monitor. She told her friend Bissy about it in the cafeteria that evening, over tea that had gone cold. Bissy worked at the hospital pharmacy. She was the only person on the 4th floor who had reliably, in 3 years, called Ada by her name. "The CEO?" Bissy put down her fork. "Dare Okafor is attending a 4th floor department meeting. That is what I was told." "Ada, that man does not attend department meetings. He has people for that. He has people for his people. Something is different. Something happened yesterday with a DNA report, I heard. Chinye from the pharmacy station said you escalated a patient result without authorization. I reported a data error that would have sent an inheritance to the wrong person. She framed it differently. Chinye frames everything differently. Ada drank the cold tea anyway. Whatever the meeting is for, I will go, I will sit down, I will say what I did and why I did it. Then I will come back to my desk. BC watched her for a long moment. You are the calmest person I have ever seen carry trouble. BC. Ada set down the cup. I am not calm. I am tired. There is a difference. The meeting was at 8 a.m. Dare arrived at 7:58. He sat at the head of the table without announcement. He went through the department's compliance records, response times, error rates, staffing gaps, the key card allocation that had lapsed 18 months ago, the bathroom renovation that had not moved in 6. He asked specific questions with specific numbers. When answers were vague, he wrote something down and moved on. The department head sat very still. Then he looked up and said, "The incident at 11:23 p.m. 2 nights ago. The DNA result that was flagged before it went out." "Who made that call?" Ada raised her hand. Dare looked at her. She was in the second-to-last seat. The peripheral seat she took as habit, the kind of habit you develop when you have spent a long time being a person who does not take up the center. Name, he said. Arden Wasu Sir, lab records. Walk me through what you found. She did, carefully, without drama. She explained the column transposition, the effect it would have had on the legal interpretation of the result, why she had called Dr. Adebayo, rather than leave a note for morning. She explained what DNA comparative analysis requires in terms of column structure, and why a transposition of that specific type was an error the software would not automatically catch. She knew this because she had read the technical documentation. Dare listened without writing. Just listened. When she finished, he said, "How do you know the column structure protocol? That is not typically within the scope of a records role." "I read the technical documentation when I started, sir. The result formats were new to me, and I did not want to make entry mistakes that others would have to correct. The column structure is detailed in Volume 3 of the WHO Laboratory Safety Guidelines." A pause. "You read the WHO technical guidelines?" Voluntarily. "Yes, sir. Volume 3 and parts of Volume 4. The department head made a sound. Dare looked at him briefly. The department head stopped making sounds. Dare looked back at Ada. If the error had gone through, what would the legal outcome have been for the Easy estate? The result would have shown a negative paternity finding, where the correct finding is positive. Entered into the legal record at that stage of evaluation, reversing it would have required a formal retesting process, a legal filing, to contest the initial certification, and a waiting period. Depending on the estate attorney's timeline, that could take months. The wrong person would have inherited Mr. Ease's estate in the interim. "And you understood all of this at 11:23 p.m. "Yes, sir. And you flagged it anyway." She met his eyes. "What would have been the reason not to, sir?" The room did not move. Someone's phone vibrated against the table and the person holding it turned it face down immediately, as if embarrassed by the sound. Dare closed his notepad. "There will be a 90-day audit of all patient DNA results. New accuracy protocols by end of month. The elevator key card for this floor will be allocated this week. The bathroom renovation will have a completion date filed with facilities by Friday." He stood. "The department head's position will be reviewed separately." He left. The meeting ended. The department head stared at the wall for a long time. BC found Ada in the corridor afterward and grabbed her arm. She held it for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "Ada, that man was looking at you like what?" BC shook her head slowly. "I am not sure, but not the way he looks at other things." 2 days later, Ada's key card was upgraded. She noticed it when the 4th floor elevator opened for the first time in 23 months of passing it. She stood in front of it for a moment. The way you stand in front of something that has stopped being what you expected it to be. Then she stepped in. She told no one. But BC saw her face when she walked off the elevator and figured it out anyway. What neither of them knew was that same afternoon, Dare Okafor had made 3 phone calls. The first 2 were to his legal team regarding the department head's review. The third was to Dr. Samuel Adebayo. "The Ise inheritance evaluation," Dare said. "How is it progressing?" "We are retesting to confirm the corrected result," Dr. Samuel said. "Full certification within 10 days. I am also running a secondary cross-reference. Chief Emmanuel brought additional samples when he arrived from Abuja. Old samples from a family incident many years ago. I want to make sure we have a complete picture before I certify anything." "What kind of family incident?" A pause. "Chief Emmanuel Ez lost a child 31 years ago. A daughter. There was a car accident outside Enugu. The child survived the initial crash, but was separated in the confusion. Sent to a local clinic, while the family was brought to the central hospital. By the time anyone thought to check, the girl was not in any of the records. They searched for 8 years. It was never resolved." Dare was quiet for a moment. "You are running a cross-reference to find the daughter," he said. "Chief Emmanuel brought the samples specifically for this. He is 71 and his health is uncertain." I believe he wants to know before there is no more time to know. A pause. I am running the cross-reference against the hospital's employee health database. Standard inclusion in the scope. I am not expecting a result, but it is thorough practice. Be thorough, Dare said. Whatever you need. He hung up. He sat in his office for a moment, looking at the city through the glass wall. Then he picked up his phone again and called his grandfather. Grandpa. Yes, my boy. You said you were concerned about me. I said it, yes. If, hypothetically, I were to consider someone, not permanently, not for any decided reason, but someone I did not yet understand who was. He stopped. He tried again. Someone who read the WHO technical guidelines voluntarily. His grandfather was quiet for so long that Dare checked the line. Then Chief Joseph Okafor said, very gently, My boy, what is this person's name? Ada received the meeting request the following Thursday, from the executive assistant to the CEO through the internal system. Friday, 5 p.m., 7th floor, confidential. Contractual matter, she told BC. BC said, Go, she went. Everything in the executive suite was the particular shade of clean that requires someone paid to maintain it, specifically. The furniture was dark wood that belonged in homes where you could hear your own footsteps. Ada walked through it with her spine straight and her hands still. Dare was standing by the window when she arrived. He turned when she entered and gestured to the chair across the desk. Ada sat. He sat. He placed a folder on the desk between them and did not open it. I will be direct, he said. My grandfather is unwell. His condition is managed, but one of the primary sources of his stress is his concern that I will not marry before he dies. I am not presently interested in marriage. I am interested in my grandfather's health. These two facts have created a problem, and I am looking for a practical solution. He opened the folder. Inside was a contract. 3 pages, single-spaced. 6 months, he said. You appear as my partner at the occasions my grandfather expects attendance at. You live in the house. There is a private suite on the east wing with its own entrance and no shared living spaces unless we are in a situation that requires performance. At the end of 6 months, we part ways with a mutually agreed narrative. He met her eyes. In exchange, I will clear the 4,700,000 naira outstanding balance on your mother's hospital account. And I will formalize your secondment as a lab quality analyst, a permanent internal position within the group. Ada looked at the contract. She did not touch it. How do you know the exact balance? She said. I had the account reviewed. You reviewed my mother's medical debt. It appeared in your department's employee file, flagged for hardship deferment. He waited. Is there a problem? Ada was quiet. Outside the window, the Lagos evening was settling into that particular color, the kind that looked like a promise that could go either way. I have a condition, she said. He had not expected a condition. He had expected yes or no. The secondment contract, Ada said. I want it signed and in my possession before I sign anything else. Not conditional on my performance, not reviewable at the 6-month mark. Signed and issued on day 1. She looked at him steadily. If I am performing a service, the terms must be ones I can trust independently. I have learned that kindness which arrives without paperwork tends to leave the same way. A long silence. Dare picked up his pen. He turned to the back page of the contract and wrote 3 lines in the margin. He signed it. He passed it across. Both items are on that page, he said. Read the full document before you sign. She read it, all 3 pages, in the room. While he waited, it took 11 minutes, she signed. I have one more thing to say, Ada said, standing. Say it. I will not be unkind to your grandfather. If he is a good man, I will treat him as one. The arrangement can be professional between us. But I do not know how to perform basic human decency on a schedule. That part will be real. Something shifted in Dare's face. Not visibly, not dramatically. The way a room's pressure shifts when a window is opened somewhere distant. Fine, he said. She left. Chief Joseph Okafor met Ada for the first time on a Saturday evening in the main sitting room. He was smaller than Dare, but carried the same quality of stillness. He sat forward in his chair and looked at her with the eyes of a man who had spent a lifetime reading people and had gotten very good at it. "You are the one who caught the mistake," he said. "The DNA report." "Yes, sir. Dare told me." He looked at Dare, who was standing near the window in a way that suggested this had been mentioned in passing and was not intended to be the opening of the conversation. That kind of thing takes courage. Not loudness, courage. You know the difference. "I think so, sir. Loudness is for people who need to be heard. Courage is for doing what needs to be done, whether or not anyone is listening." He looked back at Ada. "Some people in this family could learn that." "Grandpa," Dare said. "I am giving a compliment. Let me finish." He looked at Ada. "You will not be comfortable here immediately. These things take time. But you will be treated well. I will personally make sure." Ada looked at this man, in his late 70s, unwell, sitting forward in his chair with the seriousness of someone who meant every word. She thought of her mother, who had been the same kind of serious, who had raised her entirely alone, and had never, not once, made Ada feel that the absence of money was the absence of love. "Thank you, sir," Ada said, and she meant it. Ronk arrived in the 3rd week. Ada was in the East Garden when the car came. The small garden near the bougainvillea that had taken over the northeast wall, which had become the one space in the building where she felt entirely herself. She came inside through the side entrance and found a woman standing in the main hallway with the quality of stillness that belongs to people who have rehearsed their entrances. Dressed in a way that required planning, smiling in a way that meant something other than welcome. "You must be Ada," the woman said. "Dare has mentioned you." A pause timed with precision. Once. Ronki had known Dare for 5 years. She had been, at various points, his closest companion, and the reason he had stopped taking personal calls for 6 months in late 2021. She had come back now because something had shifted in the architecture of his attention, and she had felt the change before it reached language. She had not anticipated Ada. She had expected someone easy to dismiss. The lab clerk, the convenient arrangement. She had come prepared to establish prior claim and resolve the situation quietly. What she found instead was a woman who answered her pleasantries without warmth and without hostility, who sat across from her at the dining table and looked back at her the way you look at rain you are deciding whether to walk through. "So you work at the hospital," Ronki said pleasantly, the first morning. "Lab quality analyst," Ada said. "I was recently promoted." A very small pause. Of course, Dare is generous to those who work for him. Ada looked at her. She held the look exactly long enough. Then she said, mildly, "I earned the promotion, but thank you." In the weeks that followed, Ronki established herself as a fixture. She had history with the family, familiarity with the staff, comfort in the rooms that Ada could not compete with and did not try to. She moved through the house as if it already belonged to her, without drama, in a way that was far more effective than drama. The campaign against Ada started subtly, a misplaced file, an appointment not passed on, a comment to the housekeeper just within earshot about staff knowing their place. Then it stopped being subtle. In the 4th week, a batch of patient records was accessed through Ada's work credentials at 3 a.m., accessed and moved. Ada noticed it Tuesday evening. She checked the access log herself. She called Bissy. "Someone used my credentials," Ada said quietly. "I can see the timestamp and the IP trace." "It was 3 in the morning, Bissy. I was asleep." "Ada, I need you at the hospital IT security office before 7 tomorrow. Pull the full credential access report. Cite the protocol for unauthorized access. It is in Section 7, Subsection 4 of the hospital's IT security manual. Have the report printed and officially stamped before anyone else comes in." A pause. "How do you know the IT security manual?" "Because I read it when they gave me the work-from-home setup." "Be early, BC. I will be there at 6:45, BC said. The report was in Ada's hands by 7:52 the next morning. It showed the credential, the timestamp, and the IP address from which the access had been made. The IP address was registered to a device on the household network. Ada did not go to Dare with the report. Not yet. She filed it. She kept working. She kept coming to breakfast. She kept being civil to Ronki with the steadiness of someone who cannot be reached by what is being attempted. What Ronki could not have known, what no one in that house knew, was that there was a document sitting in Dr. Samuel Adebayo's office that was about to make every other document in this story secondary. Dr. Samuel had been careful. That was his nature, careful, thorough, methodical, in the way that the best physicians are methodical, which is to say he verified twice, not from uncertainty, but from understanding that certainty requires it. He had run the corrected result for the Ize inheritance case first. It confirmed everything Ada had identified on that Wednesday night. Emmanuel Ize's son was the legitimate heir. The estate was protected. The certification was ready. Then he turned to the secondary cross-reference. The old samples Chief Emmanuel had brought from Abuja, properly stored, extracted from a 31-year-old forensic record connected to a car accident outside Enugu. A child, approximately 3 years old at the time of the accident. A red heart-shaped birthmark on the left forearm, noted in the initial clinic record. Lost in the confusion when 2 vehicles from the same crash were routed to different medical facilities. Searched for through 8 years of official inquiry, and eventually filed as unresolved. Dr. Samuel ran the cross-reference against the hospital employee health database, a standard inclusion in the scope. He was not expecting a result. He ran it the way you check a box on a form, dutifully, without anticipation. He found a match. He sat with it for a long time. Then he ran it again with a different methodology. Then he sent the raw data to an independent laboratory for blind verification, without specifying the context. He waited 6 days. The result came back identical. A match probability of 9,994%. Dr. Samuel sat in his office with both reports on the desk in front of him. Outside his window, the city continued. He looked at the name on the employee health record, Ada Nwosu. He picked up the phone and called Dare Okafor. Mr. Dare, I need a meeting, in person. It concerns the A's case, and it concerns your household. I need Miss Ada Nwosu to be present. The meeting was set for a Thursday afternoon on the 7th floor. Ada came from the hospital side of the building. She had not been told the subject. She came in her work clothes, professional, carrying nothing except the small bag she brought everywhere. Neither had Chief Okafor been told the subject. He had been invited because Dr. Samuel had said it was important, and the old man had said he would come. The Ez family's legal representative, Barrister Lawal, arrived at exactly 2 p.m. with a briefcase, and the expression of a man who had been told just enough to know this was significant. Dare was already there when Ada walked in. He looked at her when she entered. She looked back. They sat down. Dr. Samuel opened 2 folders on the desk without preamble. He looked at the room and said, I am going to explain what I have found. I am asking everyone to let me finish before they respond. What I am presenting has been independently verified. I am confident in the results. He began with an explanation, not condescending, not rushed, of what DNA cross-referencing involves. He explained it in the way a good physician explains things, translating without talking down. A cross-reference compares a genetic profile from one sample against reference samples to identify shared biological markers. It can establish familial relationships, biological identity, lineage. The error rate of the methodology used in this case was less than 1 in 4 billion. The room was paying attention in the particular way of rooms that understand something irreversible is about to be said. The cross-reference of the E family samples against the hospital employee database, Dr. Samuel said, identified one match. The match corresponds to the employee health record for Ada Nwosu. He looked at Ada. The genetic profile in the 31-year-old E's forensic record, the profile from the missing daughter of Chief Emmanuel E's, matches your own profile at a probability of 9,994%. He paused. You are not to the standard of medical and legal certainty, Ada Nwosu. Another pause. You are Adaze Eze, Chief Emmanuel Eze's daughter. The child who disappeared in the accident in 1993. Ada heard the words. She heard them one at a time, and then together as a sentence, and then she understood what the sentence meant. She did not speak. She looked at her left forearm, at the mark just above the wrist, lighter now than it had been when she was young, faded by years of sun and time, but still there. The shape she had lived with her whole life without thinking to question. The shape she had never been told was anything other than ordinary. Barrister Lawal stood up. Then he sat back down, as if he had stood before knowing what he intended to do. Chief Okafor said very quietly, Adaze. He said it the way you say a name you have been holding in your mouth for years without speaking aloud. Ada looked at him. He was looking back at her with those same eyes from the first evening in the sitting room, the eyes that had seen something and not named it. His hands, folded on his knees, were trembling slightly. This old man, this careful, quiet, watchful old man. Dare had not moved. He was looking at Ada with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not the CEO face, not the professional face, not the careful neutral he kept for rooms where he needed to show nothing. He looked like a man watching the foundation of something he had been certain about shift without warning. Ada looked at her arm again, at the mark above her wrist. The mother who raised me, she said. Her voice was steady. Deliberately steady, the way you hold a glass carefully when your hands want to shake. Her name was Rosaline Nwosu. She was a nurse. She found me near the clinic after the accident. She was the one who took me in when no one came. She looked at the folders. She raised me for 28 years. She died last November. Barrister Lawal said carefully, Miss, I need a moment, Ada said. She stood and walked to the window. Not dramatically. She just needed to stand. She looked at the city below. Same city, same buildings. Same afternoon light, doing what it always did at this hour. She thought about Mama Rosaline, about the bottom drawer of the wardrobe in their one-room flat, the one Ada had opened after the funeral, while sorting through the things that had to be sorted. Inside, wrapped carefully in old cloth, she had found a handkerchief, stiff with age, embroidered in the corner with 2 letters, E.E. She had assumed it was her mother's name, Rosaline. She had not thought about it again. She put her hand flat against the glass. She breathed. Then she turned back. I want to meet my father, she said. Not immediately. I need time to understand what this means. But I want to meet him. She looked at Dr. Samuel. I would like my own copy of the results, all of them, including the independent verification report. I have prepared copies, Dr. Samuel said. Thank you. She looked at Chief Okafor. You knew something. When we first met, the old man was quiet. I saw something, he said. Not clearly enough to be certain, only clearly enough to wonder. She nodded slowly. She sat back down. She picked up her copy of the reports, folded them, placed them in her bag. Her hands were steady. She made sure of it. What happened next moved the way consequences tend to move. Not all at once, but in accelerating sequence, each one arriving before the last had settled. Ronki learned about the meeting from the household staff. She assembled enough of the details to understand that whatever advantage she had been positioning toward had shifted in ways she had not accounted for. She made a decision that was, by any reasonable measure, the wrong one. She filed a complaint with the hospital IT security office against Ada. Unauthorized access to patient records. She had timestamps. She had screenshots. Edited ones, but screenshots. The complaint reached Dare's desk the following morning. He read it. Then he called his own IT security head. He asked for the original access log, not the version attached to the complaint. The one with IP addresses. He read the IP addresses. He set the report on the desk and looked at it for a moment. Then he went to find Ronke. He found her in the east garden, tea in front of her, the posture of complete, relaxed innocence. The IP address on the credential access log, Dare said without greeting, matches the household network. From a device registered to your personal account. Ronke looked at him. Her expression moved in very small increments. You moved Ada's files using her credentials at 3 a.m., he said. And then you filed a complaint this morning, suggesting she had done it herself. Dare, I do not need an explanation. I need you to leave. She stood. You are choosing her. After everything, I am not choosing her over you. His voice did not rise. It never rose. I am applying a standard that has nothing to do with choice. You falsified evidence against an employee. Against a woman who did nothing to you except exist in a space you wanted. He looked at her with the specific quality of stillness that in him meant something final. Pack what is yours. I will have the rest inventoried. Ronke left the garden. She left the house. She was gone before Ada returned from work that afternoon. Ada found out from Bissisi, who had heard from the IT security office. She said nothing about it to Dare when she came home. She changed out of her work clothes. She came to the evening table. She had brought Chief Okafor a bowl of pepper soup from the caterer on Adiola Street. The one he had mentioned once, 4 weeks earlier, in the middle of a conversation about something else. She set it in front of him. He looked at the bowl, then at her. You remembered, he said. You mentioned it once, she said. But you mentioned it. He ate the soup. Dare watched them from across the table with the expression of a man recalibrating something he had not known needed adjustment. Ada met Emmanuel Eze 2 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon. Dare drove her to the meeting. She had not asked him to. He had not announced he would. He had simply been standing at the car when she came downstairs, keys in hand, and she had looked at him for a moment and then gotten in. Chief Emmanuel Eze was 71, in a wheelchair, attended by a nurse who stood at the appropriate distance, with the professional discretion of someone doing their job well. He was a large man made smaller by illness. You could still see the largeness in the structure of him, in the hands, in the jaw, in the way he held his head. But illness had done what illness always does to large men. He looked at Ada for a long time when she came in. She stood in the doorway for a moment, her bag over one shoulder, and looked back. Then she crossed the room and sat beside him. I don't remember you, she said. I want to be honest about that first. I don't remember the accident. I don't remember anything from before the woman who found me. I am going to need time to understand what this means. He looked at her. His eyes were very still. Take all the time you need, he said. I have been waiting 31 years. I can wait as long as you need me to. She looked at his hands. Hands that had built things. Hands that had searched for 8 years through hospitals and police stations and dead ends for a child who had been 3 years old and wearing a white handkerchief with 2 embroidered letters. The mother who raised me, Ada said. Rosaline. She kept the handkerchief. In a drawer. I found it after she died. I thought the letters were part of her name. She paused. She saved me from the accident, and she kept the only clue about where I came from, and she never told me. I have been trying to understand that. He was quiet. I think, Ada said slowly, she kept it because she wanted me to find it when I was ready, and she did not tell me because she was afraid I would leave. She looked at his hands again. She loved me. That is not something I question. She gave up everything she had to raise me properly. She died with a debt she had been carrying alone. Ada's voice did not break. She had made sure of that before she walked in. She was my mother. I need you to know that before anything else. Emmanuel Eason nodded once. Slowly. She raised my daughter, he said, when I could not find her. I owe that woman everything. His voice was rough and careful at the same time. I will honor her. In whatever way you tell me is right. That is a promise. Ada sat with him for 2 hours. They did not cover much. They began. That was enough for now. On the drive back, Dare said nothing for a long time. The city moved past the windows. Ada sat with her hands in her lap and looked at. "You are thinking about her," Dare said. It was not a question. "Yes, the woman who raised you." "I keep coming back to the drawer," Ada said. "She kept that handkerchief for 28 years. She could have thrown it away and I would never have known. But she kept it." She looked at the passing streetlights. "She was preparing me, even when I did not know I needed to be prepared." Dare drove. He did not fill the silence with something easier. "Dare," Ada said. "Yes. You said you called Dr. Samuel about the cross-reference before the meeting." "I did. Based on what?" He was quiet for a moment. "Based on the fact that everything about you was consistent in a way that suggested a story that had not yet been told. The way you spoke in that department meeting. The things you knew. The way you carry yourself without asking anyone to notice it." He paused. "I could not have told you specifically what I was looking for. I only knew that the pieces did not add up to a lab records clerk in a corridor." "They added up to a missing heiress," Ada said dryly. "They added up to someone worth paying attention to." He glanced at her. "The heiress part was Dr. Samuel's finding. My part was earlier." She looked at him for a long moment. Outside the window, the last of the evening was disappearing into night. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Tell me." "When I signed that contract, I told myself it was practical. I told myself I was solving a problem. And for the first week, that is what it was." She looked at the road. "Somewhere in the weeks after that, I stopped being able to be purely practical about it. About this house. About your grandfather." A pause. "About you." She said it plainly, the way Ada said most things. Without arrangement, without distance. "I do not know what to do with that. I have never been in a situation where the arrangement and the feeling were running in opposite directions." Dare was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The contract has 31 days left." "I know. I would like to discuss what happens after it." "I would like that too," she said. "But not tonight. Tonight I am still processing everything else. That is fair." She turned and looked at him fully. "You are different than I thought you were. When did you think differently?" "The first time you walked through the 4th floor and did not look at me." He was quiet. "I did not look at you because I was avoiding looking at you," he said. "There is a difference." Ada did not respond, but she turned to look out the window again, and something in her face had changed. Or perhaps something had simply settled, the way things settle when they find the place they were always going to end up. The formal board meeting where the E's inheritance matter was concluded took place on a Friday morning, 3 weeks later. 43 people in the room. Dr. Samuel presented the DNA findings with the same clarity he had brought to the smaller meeting. He explained the science again. Cross-referencing, verification methodology, error rate. Because a room of 43 deserves the same respect as a room of 5. The independent verification was presented. Both reports were entered into the legal record. The room was quiet for a long time after he finished. Ada sat next to Dare. She was wearing a deep gold dress that Chief Okafor had pressed into her hands that morning, insisting she could not go to a formal proceeding in professional work clothes. She had looked at the dress for a moment before putting it on. She had thought of what Mama Rosaline always said: "Things given from love do not need to be earned. They need to be received." She put it on. When the chairman concluded the proceedings and the room stood, Dare stood beside her. He did not take her hand. But he turned slightly, in a way that placed him between her and the larger movement of the room, and he stayed there. Chief Okafor, who had attended with his doctor's reluctant permission, reached across from his chair and laid his hand briefly on her forearm, the left forearm, where the birthmark was. He did not say anything, he just nodded once. The way you nod at something true. Barrister Lawal sought Ada out before the room dispersed. He shook her hand and said something formal about the estate process and timelines. She thanked him and heard very little of it, because what she was actually doing was watching Chief Emmanuel ease across the room, being helped toward the door by his nurse, and watching the way the old man moved, slowly, carefully, with the deliberateness of someone who had waited a very long time and was not in a hurry now that the waiting was done. He turned at the door as if he had felt her looking. He nodded once. She nodded back. That was enough, for now. Ronke's matter was resolved through official channels without drama. The evidence was clean. Her attorney negotiated a settlement before it reached criminal proceedings. The settlement included a formal written apology, witnessed and signed, delivered to Ada's legal representative within 30 days. Ada read it once. She filed it. She did not think much about Ronke after that. Not from coldness. From the same practical clarity that had kept her at her desk in the corridor for 3 years. Energy spent monitoring what has been done to you is energy not spent on anything else. And Ada had a great deal of everything else to attend to. She had 2 families to understand, carefully, at her own pace. She had a lab-quality analyst position she intended to build into something the hospital had not been doing properly and should have. She had Chief Okafor to feed pepper soup to, and Emmanuel Eze to learn slowly, and Bisi to call every Thursday, and a man sitting next to her in a boardroom who had stood between her and a room full of people, and stayed there without being asked. On the evening before the 6th month ended, Dare found her in the East Garden. He came with 2 glasses of water, which was not dramatic and was, somehow, exactly right. He sat beside her. She took the glass he offered. They sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that had, over these months, begun to feel less like the absence of conversation and more like its own language between 2 people who had learned each other's rhythms. "You are going to say something about the contract," Ada said. "I was going to, yes. Tomorrow is the last day." "Yes." She turned to face him. The evening light was doing the thing it does in that garden, softening the colors, making the bougainvillea deeper and warmer than the afternoon had left it. "Dare, you know I am staying, and you know it is not because of the contract." She held his eyes. "And I know that you know that." He was quiet, the kind of quiet that meant he was receiving something he had been waiting to hear. "Say it plainly," he said. "You know I need things," said plainly. "I know you do." She looked at the bougainvillea wall. "I am staying because this garden is mine now, and that kitchen is mine, and your grandfather is mine." Her voice shifted briefly, then steadied. "And you are a work in progress, but you are mine also." Dare said, "Ada, yes. The first thing you said in that department meeting that made me look at you differently, it was not the WHO guidelines. What was it? It was when I asked you why you flagged the result, and you said, 'What would have been the reason not to?'" He paused. "I had not been asked a question like that in a very long time, one that assumed integrity as the default, not the exception." She looked at him. "I am going to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to answer it as directly as you answer everything else. Ask, do you want to stay? Not as an arrangement. Not because of the house or the position or any of the things the contract gave you. Do you want to stay the way people stay when they have chosen something and mean it?" Ada looked at him for a long moment. The garden was quiet around them. The city behind the wall was doing what the city always did, moving, indifferent, continuous. But here in this garden, in this particular evening, things felt settled in a way she had not expected to encounter so soon. "Yes," she said. "I want to stay." He reached out and took her hand. Just a hand, taken. Not arranged, not performed. She let him hold it. 1 month later, Ada sat beside Rosaline Nwosu's grave in the small cemetery where she had been buried the previous November. She had brought a new handkerchief, clean, carefully pressed, her initials embroidered in the corner, A-E-N, Adieze Eze Nwosu, both names, both lives. She spoke to her mother the way you speak to people who can no longer answer but have not stopped listening. "I found them, Mama," she said. "The other family. They are good people. My father, he is not well, but he is the kind of strong that comes from waiting a long time. He says, I have his mother's eyes. He doesn't know he is also right about your eyes. I told him about you. I told him everything. The cemetery was quiet around her. The kind of quiet that belongs to places where things are finished and things are still unfinished at the same time. I have someone, she said. He is precise and difficult and reads compliance reports in the car for relaxation. You would have had opinions about him. You always had opinions. She smiled at the headstone. He is good, Mama. The kind of good that does not announce itself. You taught me how to see that kind. She placed the handkerchief on the grave. Not as a symbol. Just because it belonged here, near this woman who had kept the first one for 28 years without explanation. I am not alone anymore, she said. I know that is what you always wanted. Not the money or the name or the other family, just that I would not be alone. She put her hand flat on the ground. I am not alone. She stayed until she was ready to leave. Then she stood, straightened her dress, and walked back to the car where Dare was waiting. Engine off, window down, with the patience of a man who had been practicing it and was getting better. She got in, he drove. For a while, neither spoke. Then she said, She would have liked you, he said. I hope so, she said. She liked people who read things carefully. He said nothing, but his hands on the wheel were lighter, and that, between the two of them, was sufficient. I have been thinking about Aidan and Wosu for some time now, about what it means to spend years in a building where no one asks your name and to show up anyway. Not because you have been defeated into compliance, but because you understand that dignity is not something other people assign to you. You carry it yourself. You carry it in how you check the work in front of you. You carry it in how you speak in a room that is not listening. You carry it past the laughter, past the indifference, past every manager who tells you to know your level, as if your level is something they have the authority to define. DNA testing, as the science in Ada's story reflects, is one of the most precise tools we have for establishing biological truth. Used correctly and ethically, as Dr. Samuel used it, with transparency, independent verification, and the full knowledge of those involved, it can restore what was lost, confirm what was doubted, and give people something they had stopped believing they could still find. In real cases around the world, genetic cross-referencing has reunited families separated for decades. It has corrected legal injustices. It has given people the names they were born with. The science is real. Its power is real. And its most important rule is that it must be used in service of the truth, not around it. Which is why Ada's decision to flag that error mattered far more than she knew at the time. But the result that mattered most in this story was not the one that confirmed who Ada's father was. It was the one that was already there, visible in every choice she made in that corridor, at 11:23 p.m., with no one watching and no reward guaranteed. That is the test that cannot be forged, cannot be transposed, cannot be reversed by anyone with a laptop and an agenda. That is the test of character. I hope this story made you think about someone you have walked past, the people in the corridors of your life who carry things you have not asked about, who know things you have not thought to discover, who are waiting, not for your recognition, but simply for the basic respect that should never have required waiting. And if you are someone who has felt like Ada, unseen, reduced to a function, told that your ceiling is fixed, I want you to hear this clearly. Your level is not determined by the people who have never paid attention to you. It is demonstrated, quietly and continuously, in what you do when no one is watching. Ada passed that test long before any boardroom discovered her name. Subscribe to the channel if this story reached you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And wherever you are tonight, see the people around you. They might be someone's missing daughter. The characters and specific events in this story are dramatic fiction crafted to explore real themes. The way people are dismissed based on job titles rather than character. The way integrity operates quietly and without audience. the role of DNA science in questions of identity and inheritance, and the lasting impact of those who love us without recognition or reward. The science of DNA identification presented here. Cross-referencing, verification methodology, error rate analysis, and the ethical obligation of medical professionals to transparency reflects genuine principles used in clinical and forensic practice worldwide. What I believe is true, beyond the story itself, is this: the people in our lives who have been overlooked the longest are often the ones carrying the most. We rarely discover this until something, or someone, forces us to look. Perhaps the real value in a story like Ada's is not the dramatic reveal. It is the reminder, before the reveal, of who she already was. That should have been enough. It always should be. Every morning at exactly 6:30, a poor waitress named Amara shared half of her breakfast with a frail old man who sat on a bench behind the hotel where she worked. The other staff called him a beggar. Her manager called feeding him a disgrace. Nobody bothered to ask his name, because nobody believed a tired old man in a worn-out coat could matter to anyone. But that old man owned the hotel. He owned the marble floors they walked on, the chandeliers above their heads, the very chairs they sat in to laugh at him. And on the morning the truth finally came out, the proud manager who had humiliated Amara in front of everyone would not be able to lift her face from the floor. This is a story about something simple. The way we treat people when we think they can do nothing for us is the truest measure of who we really are. Before we begin, if stories about quiet kindness and justice that arrives right on time mean something to you, do me one small favor. Tap subscribe, and in the comments, tell me your city and what time it is where you are watching from right now. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to a rainy Tuesday morning in July, to a bus stop in Ajagunle, and to the day Amara's ordinary life began to change. The rain in Ajagunle did not fall like rain in the rich parts of Lagos. It fell sideways. It came through the cracks in the zinc roofs, and it turned the narrow streets into rivers of mud and black water. And a girl who wanted to keep her shoes clean had to learn to dance through it. Amara had learned that dance a long time ago. She was 22 years old, and she had been waking before the rest of the world since she was 15. That Tuesday she woke at 4. She always woke at 4. There was no alarm clock in the one room she shared with her younger brother Chidi, only the sound of the first lorries coughing their way toward the markets, and her own body that had stopped needing to be told. She lit the small kerosene stove. She boiled water. She made 1 cup of Lipton tea, very weak, because the tin was almost finished and payday was still 11 days away. While the water boiled, she folded her uniform, the black skirt, and the white blouse with the little gold pin shaped like a crown. And she folded it the way her mother had taught her, with the seams matching, so that even a poor girl could look like she respected herself. Chidi was still sleeping. He was 18 now, a tall, quiet boy with their late mother's long fingers, and he was in his final year of secondary school. Amara looked at him for a moment in the grey light. She did not wake him. Let him sleep 1 more hour. The boy carried enough on his shoulders already, and she had decided years ago that whatever she could carry for him, she would carry, and she would not let him see how heavy it was. She wrapped 2 slices of bread in a clean piece of newspaper. She opened a small tin of sardines, the cheap kind in red oil, and she put 4 sardines on the bread and pressed it closed. Then she stopped. She looked at the bread, and she took half of it, wrapped it again in its own paper, and put it in the side pocket of her bag. That half was not for her. The bus stop was a 15-minute walk, and then it was 2 buses across the city, 1 to Apapa and 1 through the long crawl of traffic toward Victoria Island, where the rich kept their offices and their hotels and their air-conditioned lives. By the time Amara reached the staff entrance of the Crown, it was 6:18, and her shoes, against all her effort, were wet. The Adiemi Crown Hotel rose 20 floors into the Lagos sky. all glass and gold, the kind of building that made poor people slow down on the road just to look up at it. Inside, the floors were white marble that the night cleaners polished until you could see your own tired face in them. The chandeliers in the main lobby had been imported from a country Amara could not point to on a map. A single night in one of the rooms upstairs cost more than she earned in 2 months. She knew this because Funke had told her once, with a smile that was not a smile. One night up there is 190,000 naira. You will never sleep in a bed like that, so do not even dream of it, just clean. Amara earned 47,000 naira a month. From that came rent, and Chidi's school fees, and transport, and food, and the small medicines for her own chest that sometimes tightened in the cold. There was never anything left. There was, on a good month, just barely enough. But she was not a girl who counted what she did not have. Her mother had taught her that too, in the last hard year of her life, lying on a thin mattress and still finding things to be grateful for. Amara, she had said, a closed hand cannot receive. Keep your hand open, even when there is nothing in it. God sees the open hand. So Amara kept her hand open, and every morning, before her shift began, before the proud guests came down for their breakfast of imported eggs and fresh juice, she walked out the back of the hotel to the small public bench under the flame tree, and she sat for a few minutes with the old man. She did not know his name. The first time she saw him, 3 months before, she had thought he was sleeping rough, the way many old men in Lagos with no one to care for them ended up sleeping rough, on benches, under bridges, forgotten. His coat was good once, but it was worn through at the elbows now. His shoes did not match the coat. His hands shook when he held them out, a fine tremble, and there was a sadness in his face so deep and so quiet that it had stopped her in her tracks. That first morning, she had simply given him her bread. She had not thought about it. She had seen a hungry old man, and she had an open hand, and the two things met the way her mother said they should. "Thank you, my daughter," he had said. His voice was rough, but it was not the voice of a street beggar. It was a careful voice, an educated voice, a voice that had once given orders. She had not noticed that then. She noticed it later. She had started calling him Papa. He never told her his real name, and she never pushed. In Lagos, you learned not to push at the things people kept hidden. Everyone was carrying something. That rainy Tuesday, she came around the corner, and there he was, as always, under the flame tree, the rain dripping off the broad leaves onto the collar of his ruined coat. He was looking up at the back of the hotel, at the 20 floors of glass, the way she herself sometimes looked at it. There was something on his face she could not read. It was not envy. It was something older than envy. "Papa," she said softly. "Good morning. You will catch cold sitting in this rain. Move under here. Come." She helped him shift along the bench to the dry part, under the small overhang, and she sat beside him and unwrapped the bread. "You did not have to bring me anything today," he said. His hand shook as he took it. "The rain is too much. You should keep it for yourself, my daughter." "I already ate," she lied. She lied easily and kindly. "Eat. You are too thin. Are you eating at all when I am not here?" He almost smiled. It was the closest thing to a smile she had seen on him. "You worry about an old beggar like I am your own father." "My own father I never knew," she said simply. "So maybe God is letting me practice on you." This time he did smile, and for a moment the deep sadness lifted off his face, and Amara saw something there she had not seen before. A sharpness. A light in the old man's eyes that did not belong to a man who had given up. She did not think much of it. She was 22, and she was tired, and she had a 12-hour shift in front of her. What she did not know, what she could not possibly have known, was that the old man under the flame tree had built that hotel. Every brick of it. 40 years ago he had stood on this exact spot when it was an empty lot of red earth, and he had promised a young woman, with a tray in her hands and flour on her apron, that he would build something beautiful, and he would put her name on it. His name was Tunde Adeyemi. The hotel behind him was the Adeyemi Crown, and the young woman with the tray had been his wife, Folktale, who had died 14 months ago, and who had once, long before there was any money, worked as a waitress in a small restaurant on this very ground. That was why he came. Not to beg. He came because this was the last place on earth where he could still feel close to her, and because grief had hollowed him out so completely that he no longer cared what he looked like, or who saw him, or what they thought. After Folktale died, and after the small stroke that had stolen the steadiness from his right hand 3 months ago, Tunde Adeyemi had let go of almost everything. He had handed the running of the hotel to managers he barely knew. He had stopped visiting the office. He had become, to the world, exactly what he appeared to be on that bench. An old man nobody recognized. Nobody at the Crown knew the founder's face anymore. The young ones had been hired in the last few years, long after he stopped coming. To them he was a story, a name on the building, a portrait somewhere in a corridor they never walked down. None of them had ever stood close enough to the real man to know that the beggar under the flame tree, the one the manager wanted chased away, was the one person in all of Lagos who could close the entire hotel with a single phone call. Amara folded the empty newspaper. She stood. She brushed the rain off her skirt. "I have to go in, Papa," she said. "Funke will be looking for a reason to shout this morning. I can feel it. Stay dry. I will bring you something hot tomorrow if I can manage it." He caught her wrist as she turned. His grip was weak, but his eyes were not. "Why do you do this?" he asked. "Every morning. In the rain. For a stranger who can give you nothing back. Tell me the truth." Amara thought about it. She did not give him a sweet answer. She gave him the real one. "Because somebody should," she said. "Because one day it might be me on a bench, and I would want somebody to see me. That is all. There is no big reason." She did not see his eyes fill. She was already gone, hurrying through the rain to the staff door. And so she missed the way the old man watched her go, and she missed the way his shaking hand pressed flat against his chest, as if something in there hurt and healed at the same time. Inside, the kitchen was already a storm of steam and shouting. Amara clocked in at 6:29. 1 minute to spare. She tied her apron, and she had not even reached the breakfast floor when she heard the voice she dreaded most. "You, Amara, come here." Funke Adebayo stood at the entrance to the dining room with her arms folded, and the look on her face was the look of a woman who had been waiting all morning for someone to punish. She was 35, the floor manager, and she wore her small power the way some people wear an expensive perfume, too much of it so that everyone in the room had to smell it. "Yes, Ma," Amara said. She kept her eyes down. She had learned that too. "I saw you," Funke said, "from the staff window, sitting outside with that dirty old beggar again, feeding him. In your uniform. He was hungry, Ma. He was hungry." Funk repeated the words slowly. "The way you repeat something a foolish child has said. Do you think this is a charity center? Do you think the guests upstairs, paying 190,000 naira a night, want to look out of their windows and see a beggar eating bread on our property, fed by my own staff? Eh? Do you want to drive away the kind of people who keep this roof over your useless head?" A few of the other waiters had slowed down to watch. They always did. Funke was at her happiest with an audience. "It will not happen again, Ma," Amara said quietly. "It had better not." Funke stepped closer. She was taller than Amara, and she used it. "Let me tell you something, village girl. You smell of that bus you take every morning. You smell of suffering. The only reason you stand on this floor is because I have not yet found a girl who will scrub it better than you. The day I find her, you are finished. So you will keep your bread, and your pity, and your open hand to yourself. This is the Crown. We do not feed beggars here. We are the kind of place beggars are not even allowed to look at." She let the words land. She wanted them to hurt, and they did. But Amara had built a wall a long time ago, a quiet wall, and she stood behind it, and she said nothing. "Now go and set table 9, Funky said. turning away, already bored. And fix your face. Nobody wants to be served by a girl who looks like she is going to a funeral. Amara went to set table 9. Her hands were steady. Her face was calm. That was the strange and stubborn thing about her. The thing Funky could never break, no matter how she tried. The more they pushed her down, the straighter she seemed to stand. She did not know, as she laid the heavy silver forks in their perfect rows, that out under the flame tree, the old man she had just fed was still sitting in the rain. She did not know that he had heard, through the open staff window, every single word that Funke had said. She did not know that something had shifted in him, something slow and cold and certain, the way the ground shifts before it decides to move. She only knew that it was Tuesday, that the rain was heavy, and that she had 11 days until payday, and 20,000 naira left to her name, and a brother who deserved better than the life she could give him. She had no idea that her ordinary morning had just become the first morning of everything that was about to change. The trouble began on a Thursday, 2 days later, and it began with a watch. Room 1412 belonged to a man named Chief Bassi, a heavy, loud politician's friend from Calabar, who had been staying at the Crown for 6 days, and who treated everyone below him like furniture. He wore a gold Rolex on his thick wrist, and he liked to take it off at breakfast and set it on the white tablecloth beside his plate, so that everyone passing could see it, could see the weight of it, the shine of it. It was the kind of watch that cost more than Amara would earn in 15 years. That Thursday, Chief Bassi came down for breakfast at 8:40. He sat at table 7. He took off the watch, he set it on the cloth, and he ate a breakfast large enough for 3 men, and he shouted twice for more coffee, and Amara, who was serving that section, brought it to him both times with her eyes down and her voice soft. "Yes, Chief, and right away, Chief." At 9:25, he stood up to take a phone call out on the terrace. He did not take the watch. People like Chief Bassi did not worry about their watches the way poor people worried about their last 20 naira. He simply walked away from it, certain the world would keep it safe for him. At 9:31, when he came back, the watch was gone. What happened next happened fast, the way disasters always do. The chief began to shout. The shout brought Funke running. Funke brought Mr. Coker, the general manager. A smooth man of about 50 with a quiet voice and cold eyes, the kind of man who never raised his voice because he never needed to. Within 10 minutes, the breakfast floor had stopped. Guests were craning their necks. And in the middle of it stood Amara, because Amara had been the one serving table 7, and in the eyes of people who had already decided what the poor were capable of, that made her the thief. "Search her," Chief Bassi said. "Search the girl. She was the only one near my table." "Chief, please, let us handle this with discretion," Coker said smoothly. "Funk, take the girl to the back office." Amara did not run. A guilty girl might have run. She walked, with her chin up and her heart slamming against her ribs, through the swinging doors and into the small grey back office, and she stood there while Funke went through her bag, her apron, her pockets, with a slow thoroughness that was almost loving, because Funke had wanted this for a long time, and she could not believe her good fortune. There was no watch. Of course there was no watch. "It is not here," Amara said. Her voice was very quiet. "I did not touch it, ma. I have never stolen anything in my life. You can ask anyone who Euro. Be quiet." Funke held up a hand, and then slowly she smiled. "Maybe you hid it. Eh? You poor ones, you are clever. Maybe you passed it to someone. Or maybe our Euro." She paused, savoring it. "Our Euro. Maybe you put it somewhere you thought we would not look." She walked to the row of metal lockers where the staff kept their things. She walked straight to Amara's locker, not to the others, to Amara's, and she opened it, and she reached to the very back, behind the folded spare blouse, and her hand came out holding the gold Rolex, swinging it on one finger so that the whole room could see it shine. The breath went out of Amara's body. She actually felt it leave, The way you feel the wind knocked out of you when you fall hard on your back. For a moment, she could not speak at all. She could only stare at the watch, this thing she had never touched, hanging from Funke's finger in the cold grey light, and she understood, all at once and completely, what had been done to her. "I did not put that there," she whispered. "Ma, I swear to you, I swear on my mother's grave, I did not put that there. You know I did not." "You Euros, I know what I see," Funke said. Her voice had gone calm and terrible. "I see a thief. I see exactly what I always said you were. A village girl who came here smelling of the bus and decided she could help herself to what better people own. After everything this hotel did for you. After we gave you a uniform and a salary and a place to stand among decent people. Please." And now Amara's wall, the wall she had built so carefully over so many years, began to crack, because this was not an insult she could simply stand behind and endure. This was her name. This was the one thing she owned. "Mr. Coker, sir, please. I have worked here 3 years. 3 years, and not one cup has gone missing, not one spoon. Why would Euros on a Thursday in front of everyone Euros? Why would I take a watch I could never even sell? Where would a girl like me sell a watch like that? Think, sir. Please think. It does not make sense." For just a moment, something flickered behind Coker's cold eyes. Because it did not make sense, and a smart man knew it. But making sense was not the point. The point was that Chief Bassi was an important guest, and an important guest needed his watch found and his anger soothed, and a thief delivered up to him. And it was so much simpler, so much cleaner. If the thief was a poor waitress nobody would miss, than if the hotel had to admit it did not know what had happened. "The evidence is in her locker," Coker said quietly. "That is what matters. Funke, has anything like this happened with this girl before?" And here Funke told the lie that finished it. "Small things, sir," she said, lowering her eyes as if it pained her. "Food from the kitchen. A guest complained 2 weeks ago about money. I did not report it because I felt sorry for her. I see now that my pity was a mistake. It was all invention, every word. But it was said in a soft, regretful, reasonable voice, and reasonable lies are the most dangerous kind. And Amara watched the trap close over her and knew there was nothing she could say that would open it again. "You are dismissed," Coker said. "Effective immediately. You will leave the premises now. Consider yourself fortunate that Chief Bassi has agreed not to involve the police. As a courtesy to the hotel, you will not receive this month's salary. It will be held against the cost of the inconvenience. And you will not use the crown as a reference, ever. Now, get your things and go." Amara stood very still. 11 days to payday, 20,000 naira to her name. And now no salary and no job and no reference, and a stain on her name that would follow her to every other door she knocked on in this city. Because Lagos was large, but word among hotel managers was small and chiddy. Chidi's final examination fees were due in 9 days. 215,000 naira, the school had said. And there was a deadline, and a boy who missed the deadline did not write the examination. And a boy who did not write the examination did not finish school. And a boy who did not finish school in this country was finished before he had begun. She had been saving for it for a year. The money was nearly there. This month's salary was supposed to be the last piece. She thought of all of this in the space of about 4 seconds, standing in the grey office with the watch swinging on Funke's finger. "Can I say one thing?" she said. Her voice did not shake. She was proud of that later. It did not shake, not to defend myself. "You have decided, and I am too small to argue with people like you. I only want to say one thing, and then I will go." Coker said nothing, which she took as permission. "My mother used to say that what you do in the dark, the sun will eventually carry into the light. I do not know who put that watch in my locker, but God knows, and one day the sun will carry it out. I hope when that day comes, you remember this morning. I hope you remember that you had a chance to think, and you chose not to." She looked at Funke then, directly, for the first time. "And you. I have never done anything to you but my work, and you have hated me for it since the first day. I do not know why, but I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, because hating you would cost me more than I can afford." Then she took off her apron. She folded it, seams matching, the way her mother had taught her, and she set it on the desk. She took her bag with the empty newspaper still in the side pocket, and she walked out of the Adeyemi Crown Hotel with her chin up, and her shoes still faintly damp. And she did not let herself cry until she was 3 streets away. And even then she only let herself do it for as long as it took to walk to the bus stop, and not 1 second longer, because she had a brother to feed, and tears did not buy bread. What Amara did not know, as she sat on the bus going home in the middle of the day for the first time in 3 years, was that Funke had taken the watch herself the previous evening. She had lifted it from Chief Bassie's table during the dinner service, when he left it there as he always did, drunk and careless. She had planned to keep it. The Rolex was worth more than 2 years of Funke's salary, and Funke had debts, and a brother of her own with very different appetites from Chidi's, and a lifestyle she could not afford on what the crown paid her. The watch was meant to be hers. But when the chief raised the alarm that Thursday morning, Funke had panicked, and in her panic she had seen, all at once, a way to turn her crime into a weapon. She would plant the watch on Amara. She would be rid of the girl she hated, and the theft would be solved, and no one would ever search the floor manager, because who searches the one doing the searching? It was clever. It was cruel. And it would have worked perfectly. Except for one thing Funke did not know. It would have worked except that the Adeyemi Crown Hotel had, 11 months earlier, on the insurance company's strict instruction, installed a new security system. 41 cameras. High definition, recording continuously to a server in the basement, kept for 90 days. There was a camera over the dining room. There was a camera in the corridor outside the back office. And there was a camera, small and black and easy to forget, mounted high in the corner of the staff locker room, the very last place anyone would think to look, pointing directly at the row of metal lockers. Funke had forgotten about that camera. People always forget the camera that watches them. They remember the ones that watch others. And there was something else Funke did not know. Something that would matter even more than the camera in the end. She did not know that the old beggar she had ordered chased away from the flame tree 2 days before. The dirty old man she had been so disgusted to see eating bread on the hotel's property, owned the building, owned the cameras, owned the server in the basement, and owned, in a very real sense, Funke's entire future. She did not know that on that very Thursday afternoon, while Amara wept her brief and bitter tears at the bus stop, the old man was making a phone call. The first phone call he had made to his own office in 14 months. His shaking hand held the phone to his ear. And when his lawyer answered, surprised and a little frightened to hear the voice of a man everyone had assumed was finished, Tunde Adeyemi said only 5 words. "I am coming back," quietly. Here is the thing that nobody who plotted against Amara understood about her. They thought that taking her job would take her kindness. They thought the two things were connected, that she was only good because she could afford to be, that the open hand would close the moment the world stopped putting anything in it. They were wrong. The morning after she was dismissed, Amara woke at 4. Her body still woke at 4. She lay in the dark and she listened to Chidi breathing, and she felt the fear come up in her chest like cold water rising in a well, the fear of the 9 days and the 215,000 naira and the empty future. And she let herself feel it for exactly as long as she had let herself cry at the bus stop. And then she got up. She made the weak tea. She wrapped 2 slices of bread and 4 sardines, and then she stopped and looked at the bread, and she did the same thing she did every morning. She took half. She wrapped it separately. She put it in the side pocket of her bag. Chidi stirred. "Sis," he said, his voice thick with sleep. "Why are you up? Is it not your day off?" He did not know yet. She had not been able to tell him yet. She had decided to carry it one more day before she made him carry it too. Yes, she said, just going out for small air. Sleep. She took 2 buses across the city. She had no job to go to. She had no reason on earth to spend her last few hundred naira on transport to a hotel that had thrown her out like a thief. But there was an old man under a flame tree who would be hungry, and who had no one else, and Amara had decided a long time ago what kind of person she was going to be. And she was not going to let Folktale decide it for her. The rain had stopped. The morning was grey and washed clean. And the old man was there exactly where he always was, on the bench under the flame tree, looking up at the glass tower that had taken everything from her. "Papa," she said. "Good morning." He turned, and the look on his face when he saw her was strange, complicated, a look she could not read at all. There was surprise in it, but underneath the surprise was something that looked almost like pain. "My daughter, I bring you food, don't I?" She sat down. She unwrapped the bread and put it in his shaking hands. "Eat, while it is fresh." He did not eat. He held the bread, and he looked at her, and he said, "I heard. 2 days ago. I was sitting here and I heard through the window the things the woman said to you. About the bread, about the beggar." His voice was very low. "And I have heard since what they did to you yesterday. The watch. The lie. They dismissed you." Amara went still. "How do you know about the watch? An old man on a bench hears many things," he said, which was not an answer, but she let it pass. "Tell me the truth, Amara. Did you take it?" And she looked at him, this old man she had fed every morning for 3 months, this stranger she had no reason to trust, and every reason, today of all days, to be angry at the whole world. And she found that she did not want to lie to him, not even the small, kind lies she told to spare people. "No," she said. "I did not take it. Somebody put it in my locker. I think I know who. But I cannot prove it, and even if I could, who would believe a poor girl over a manager? That is not how it works, Papa. You know that is not how it works. The poor do not get believed. We just get blamed, and then we get up the next morning and we keep going, because what else is there? And yet," he said softly, "here you are, with no job, with your name ruined. And the first thing you do, the very first morning, is take 2 buses across this whole city, with money you do not have, to feed an old beggar who can do nothing for you." He shook his head slowly, and now she could see, clearly, that his eyes were wet. "Why, Amara? After what the world did to you yesterday, why are you still keeping your hand open?" "Because if I close it," she said, "then they win. Not Funky, not the manager. The whole hard world wins, the thing that tells you to look after yourself and let everyone else suffer. My mother kept her hand open until the day she died, and she died with nothing, Papa. Nothing but a son she could not see grow up, and a daughter who had to leave school at 15. And you would think that should have taught me to close my hand. But it taught me the opposite. Because I was there. I saw her die, and I am telling you, the open hand was the only thing she had that the world could not take. They took everything else. They could not take that. And they will not take it from me either." The old man put down the bread. He covered his face with his 2 shaking hands, and his shoulders moved, and Amara realized with alarm that he was weeping. This old man, weeping the way old men weep, silently, as if they have learned to be ashamed of it. "Papa," she said, frightened now. "Papa, what is it? What did I say? I am sorry, Akuras. You did not say anything wrong." He wiped his face roughly with the back of his hand. "You reminded me of someone. That is all. Someone I lost." She used to say almost exactly those words to me, the open hand. She said it for 40 years, and God forgive me, I had started to forget the sound of her saying it. And now an angel on a bench has said it back to me, and He stopped, he could not go on. They sat in silence for a while. A bird moved in the wet leaves of the flame tree above them. The city was waking up all around, the traffic thickening, the day beginning, and for these few minutes none of it touched the 2 of them on the bench. "I am going to tell you something now," the old man said at last. And I need you to listen, and not be afraid, and not get up and run. Can you do that? You are frightening me. I know. I am sorry. Just listen." He took a breath. "Amara, I am not our Euros." And that was the exact moment that it happened. Later, she would replay it 1,000 times, and she would never be sure she had not somehow caused it, somehow brought it on by frightening him, even though the doctors told her again and again that it had been coming for months, that it had nothing to do with her, that if anything she was the reason he was still alive. The old man's face changed. In the middle of the word, his face simply changed. The left side of it seemed to slide downward like a candle going soft in the heat. His eyes went wide and confused. He reached for her, his good hand grabbing at her arm, and his mouth moved but no words came out, only a thick, terrible sound, and then his whole body began to tilt sideways off the bench. "Papa!" She caught him. He was heavier than he looked. She went down onto the wet ground with him, holding his head, holding it off the concrete, and she was shouting now, shouting for help. "Somebody, please, help me. Somebody call an ambulance, please." People stopped. People always stopped to look. But in Lagos, looking and helping are two different things, and for a few endless seconds nobody moved. They only stared at the poor girl on the ground, holding the old beggar. And Amara understood that no one was going to help her, that to all of them this was just another piece of street suffering, two poor strangers. Nothing to do with them. So she helped herself. She had no money for an ambulance, and an ambulance in Lagos traffic might take an hour anyway. She held the old man, and she shouted at the gathering crowd until a Danfo driver, a young man with kind eyes who reminded her of Chidi, finally pushed forward and said, "My bus is there. Carry him. I know the general hospital. Quick, quick." They carried him into the Danfo, Amara and the driver, and one other man who had finally been shamed into helping, and they laid him across the back seat with his head in Amara's lap, and the driver drove like a madman through the morning traffic, leaning on his horn, mounting the curb twice, and Amara held the old man's head and watched his face and talked to him the whole way. "Stay with me, Papa. You hear me? Stay with me. You are not allowed to go. I did not feed you for 3 months, so you could die on me now. Stay, stay." His good eye found hers. He could not speak. But his good hand found her hand, and he gripped it, and he held on. She did not let go. Not in the Danfo. Not when they reached the hospital and the nurses came running with a trolley. Not when they wheeled him through the doors, marked emergency, where she was not allowed to follow. She walked beside the trolley holding his hand until the very last possible moment, until a nurse physically peeled her fingers away and said, kindly but firmly, "Madam, you have to let us work now. Wait outside, we will come and tell you." So she waited. She sat on a hard plastic chair in the corridor of the general hospital, in her ordinary clothes, with the empty newspaper still in her bag, and she waited. She did not think, even once, about the job interview, because there had been one. That was the thing she would never tell anyone, the thing that only she would ever know. The day before, in the bitter hours after her dismissal, a friend of a friend had sent word of an opening, a waitress position at a restaurant in Surulere. Nothing like the Crown, but a job, a real job with a real salary. And the owner had agreed to see her that very morning at 9 o'clock. And he had been clear that he had 10 other girls to see, and the first one who impressed him would get it, and if she was late, she should not bother coming at all. It was 8:50 when the old man's face slid sideways on the bench. She could have laid him down gently and run for her interview. A reasonable person might have. He was a stranger. He was a beggar. She had 9 days and 215,000 naira, and a brother whose whole future hung on her getting work. Any work, immediately. The interview was the sensible choice. The interview was survival. She did not even think about it. When his face changed, the interview simply ceased to exist. There was only the old man and her 2 hands, and the one thing she knew how to do, which was to keep her hand open, even when it cost her everything. She missed the interview. The job in Surulere went to another girl, and Amara sat in the hospital corridor and did not regret it for a single second. And that, more than anything she had ever done, more than 3 months of bread under a flame tree, was the true measure of who she was. It was almost 2 hours before a doctor came out, a tired young woman with a clipboard, who looked at Amara and said, "Are you the family of the gentleman who came in this morning? The elderly man, the stroke?" "I am our Euro." Amara hesitated. "I am not family. I am the one who brought him." "Is he Euro's?" "He is stable. It was a stroke, his second, I think, but we caught it in time." "You caught it in time?" Another 20-30 minutes, and we would be having a very different conversation. The doctor looked at her more closely. "You did everything right. Most people would have walked past. You should know that. You saved his life." Amara's eyes filled. "Can I see him?" "Soon. He is resting." "But Madame Euro." The doctor glanced down at her clipboard, and a strange expression crossed her face, a kind of confusion. "We need to reach his family. Do you know anything about him?" "A name? Anyone we can call? Because we found a card in his coat. An old one, tucked in the lining, and I have to be honest with you. When we read it, we thought it must be a mistake." She turned the clipboard around, so Amara could see the small white card she had clipped to it. The card was worn soft at the edges, the printing faded, but it was still readable. And Amara read it, and the corridor seemed to tilt very slowly around her the way the old man had tilted off the bench. The card said, "Tundi Adeyemi, Funder and Chairman." The Adeyemi Crowned Hotel. Amara read the card 3 times. The letters did not change. "That cannot be right," she heard herself say. "He is our Euro. He sits on a bench behind the hotel. I have been feeding him for 3 months. He is our Euro." The word stuck in her throat. Beggar. She had almost called the old man she loved a beggar. "I know," the doctor said gently. "We thought the same. But the card was sewn into the lining of his coat, madam. People do not sew a stranger's card into their coat. We have called the number on it. Someone is coming." Someone came. 40 minutes later, a tall, serious man of about 40 strode into the corridor, followed by 2 others, and the moment he saw the doctor, he said, "Where is he? Where is my father? I am Daniel Adeyemi. I got a call that my father was here, that he had a stroke of Euros. Where is he?" And then his eyes fell on Amara, sitting small and frightened on the plastic chair, and his face hardened with suspicion. Because that is what wealth teaches you, to see a threat in every poor stranger near your father's hospital bed. "Who is this?" he said. It was the doctor who answered before Amara could. "This," she said, "is the young woman who saved your father's life. She was with him when the stroke happened. She held his head off the ground. She found transport. She brought him here herself, and she has been sitting in this corridor for 3 hours, refusing to leave, until she knew he was alive. If you are looking for someone to thank, sir, you can start with her." Daniel Adeyemi looked at Amara for a long moment. Something in his face shifted, the suspicion loosening into confusion, and then into something that was almost shame. "You are the one," he said slowly. "You are the waitress from the hotel. You know about me? My father called me yesterday. The first time he has called me in months. Since my mother died, he has barely spoken to anyone. He shut us all out. He would not let us help him. He just disappeared into his grief." Daniel's voice cracked slightly, and he steadied it. "But yesterday he called. And he told me about a girl who fed him bread every morning under a flame tree. A girl who did not know who he was. He told me she had been accused of something she did not do and thrown out like a criminal. And he said, 'Ah, Euro.'" Daniel stopped. "What did he say?" Amara whispered. "He said he had finally found one honest person inside his own hotel, and he said he was going to make it right. He said it was the first thing in 14 months that he wanted to live for." Daniel passed a hand over his face. "Then this morning I got the call that he was here. I thought I had lost him too. I thought, He could not finish, and Amara, who had nothing, who had lost her job and her name and her last hope of paying her brother's fees, stood up from the plastic chair and did the only thing she knew how to do for a person in pain. She put her hand on the rich man's arm, this stranger, this billionaire's son, and she said, "He is alive. The doctor says you caught it in time. He is going to be all right. Hold on to that. The rest we can carry tomorrow." "We," she said, "we," to a man whose watch alone was worth more than her life. And Daniel Adeyemi, who had been raised among people who measured everyone by what they could take, stared at this poor girl who had just offered to help him carry his own father's illness. And he understood, finally, exactly what his father had been trying to tell him on the phone. Tunde Adeyemi spent 6 days in the hospital. He could not speak clearly at first, but his mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in over a year, as if the kindness of one girl had reached into him and turned a light back on. And every one of those 6 days, Amara came. She came in the morning, before the family arrived, because she did not want to be in the way of important people. And she sat with the old man and she talked to him about nothing, about the rain, about Chidi, about her mother, and she fed him soft food with a spoon when his hand shook too much to hold it, and slowly, day by day, his speech came back. On the 4th day he could talk again, mostly, and he held her hand with his good hand and he said, "I lied to you, Amara, all those mornings. I let you believe I was a poor old beggar." "You did not lie," she said. "I never asked who you were. You let me see what I wanted to see. That is not the same as lying." "Why are you not angry?" he said. "I own that hotel. I could have stopped them. The day they threw you out, I could have walked in there and stopped it with one word, and instead I sat on that bench and I let it happen. I let them ruin your name. Are you not angry at me for that?" Amara was quiet for a moment. "A little," she admitted, because she had decided long ago never to lie to this man. "A little, yes. But then I think, Ayuro, if you had stopped them with one word that day, I would never have known what they really were, and neither would you. Sometimes the only way to know what is in a person is to let them think no one is watching. You did not let them ruin me, Papa. You let them show you their true faces. There is a difference, and anyway, Ayuro," she smiled. "Ayuro, it is done. What is the use of carrying anger to a sick man's bedside? I did not come here to be paid back. I came here because you are my Papa, and Papa was sick." The old man closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were clear and hard and full of purpose. "On Friday," he said, "I am being discharged, and on Saturday there is the hotel's anniversary gathering. 30 years of the crown. All the staff will be there, in the grand ballroom, and the managers, and the board, and the press. I have not attended in 2 years. They are not expecting me." He gripped her hand. "I want you to come, Amara, as my guest. Will you come?" "Papa, I cannot. They threw me out. I am not allowed €2." "You are allowed," he said, "because I say you are allowed, and I own the building. Come on Saturday. Wear whatever you have. It does not matter what you wear. Just come and stand at the back and watch. And whatever happens, whatever you see, do not be afraid. The sun is about to carry something into the light. You told me it always does. Let us see if you were right." So on Saturday evening, Amara came. The grand ballroom of the Adeyemi crown was a sea of gold and white. 300 people filled it, the entire staff in their best uniforms. The board members in their agbadas and their dark suits, 2 reporters with cameras, waiters circulating with trays of small, expensive things. At the front was a stage with a podium, and on the podium a microphone, and behind it a great screen showing the hotel's logo, the Golden Crown. Amara stood at the very back in a clean blue dress that had been her mother's, holding her own hands so they would not shake. Across the room she saw Funke resplendent in red, laughing too loudly at something Mr. Coker had said. Neither of them saw her. Why would they look at the back? Important people never look at the back. At 8 o'clock, Mr. Coker took the stage to begin the speeches. He was halfway through a smooth, oily address about the Crown's proud 30 years, about excellence and family and tradition, when the great doors at the side of the ballroom opened, and Tunde Adeyemi walked in. He was not wearing the worn coat. He was wearing a deep blue agbada, immaculate, the cloth heavy with quiet money, and his son Daniel walked on one side of him and his lawyer on the other. And though he leaned on a cane and walked slowly, there was nothing weak in the way he came. The whole room turned, the whole room went silent, and then the whispering began, rippling outward. Oga, the chairman, that is the founder, that is Chief Adeyemi himself. He is here. He has not been seen in 2 years, sir. Mr. Coker's smooth voice died in his throat. The color drained out of his face, because Coker, unlike the younger staff, was old enough to know exactly who Tunde Adeyemi was. And Coker, unlike anyone else in that room, knew the precise contents of his own conscience, and he understood in the space of a single heartbeat that the old man walking toward the stage was the one person in Lagos who could destroy him. Chief Adeyemi, Coker stammered, abandoning the podium. Sir, what a euro, what an honor. We did not know you were coming. We would have prepared euros. I know you did not know, Tun said. His voice was not loud. He did not need it to be loud. The whole room had gone so quiet that a whisper would have carried. That is rather the point of a surprise, Mr. Coker. People show you who they truly are when they think you are not coming. He climbed the 3 steps to the stage slowly, leaning on his cane, refusing Daniel's offered arm. He stood at the podium. He looked out at the 300 faces, at his staff, at his board, at the 2 reporters whose cameras had begun, very quietly, to record. 30 years ago, he said, I built this hotel. I built it for a woman. Some of you are too young to have known her. Her name was Folake, and before she was my wife, before there was a single naira of any of this, she was a waitress. She carried trays. She wore an apron. She got shouted at by men who thought a tray in her hands made her less than them. He paused. She died 14 months ago, and I will be honest with you because I am too old now for anything but honesty. When she died, I stopped caring about all of this. The gold, the crown. I let it run itself. I sat outside on a bench, like an old fool, because that bench is where she used to take her break 40 years ago, and it was the only place left where I could still feel her. The room was utterly still. And while I sat on that bench, Tundi continued, looking like exactly what grief had made of me, a tired old man in a worn coat, something happened that I want all of you to hear. Every single morning, a young woman from this hotel came out and gave me half of her breakfast. She did not know who I was. She thought I was a beggar. She had almost nothing herself, and she gave me half of it, in the rain, every single day, and she asked for nothing. And she never once knew that the old man she was feeding owned the very building she worked in. His voice thickened. Her name is Amara, and 2 weeks ago this hotel accused her of stealing and threw her into the street and ruined her name and took her salary, while I sat outside and heard every word of it through the window. A gasp went through the room. Heads began to turn, searching. Funke had gone very white. Now, Tundi said, and his voice changed, hardened, became the voice of the man who had built an empire out of red earth. I am an old man, and I am tired, and I do not have the patience anymore for long speeches or for accusations I cannot prove. So I am not going to accuse anyone of anything. I am simply going to show you all something, and you may draw your own conclusions. Daniel Adeyemi stepped to a laptop at the side of the stage. The golden crown vanished from the great screen, and in its place appeared an image that everyone in that ballroom recognized at once. The staff locker room, the row of grey metal lockers. Date and time stamped in the corner. The Wednesday evening before the Thursday theft. The footage played. And the whole room watched, in total silence, as Funke Adebayo walked alone into the locker room, looked carefully over her shoulder, took a gold watch from her own handbag, opened a particular locker, and pushed the watch deep into the back of it, behind a folded blouse. Then she closed the locker, looked over her shoulder one more time, and walked out. The silence after the footage ended was the loudest silence Amara had ever heard. That locker, Tunde said quietly, belonged to Amara. and the watch, as you can all see, was placed there the night before by the very person who found it the next morning and who used it to destroy an innocent girl. There is more. My auditors have spent the last 6 days going through the staff payroll at my instruction. We have found that for the past 2 years, certain wages have been quietly reduced before they reached the staff who earned them. Small amounts, spread across many people, so that no single person would notice or complain. A few thousand naira here, a few thousand there. It adds up, over 2 years, to just over 4 million naira. The records lead to 2 signatures, Mr. Coker's and Madame Funke's. Coker sat down very suddenly in a chair that happened to be behind him. Funke did not sit down. Funke stood frozen in her red dress in the middle of the silent ballroom, with 300 people turning to stare at her, with the 2 cameras now pointed directly at her face. And she opened her mouth and no sound came out of it at all. "I told you I would not accuse anyone," Tunde said. "I have not. I have only shown you what was done in the dark." He turned, and his eyes found Amara at the back of the room, and his stern old face softened completely. "Amara, my daughter, come up here. Come and stand where everyone can see you. You have stood at the back of rooms your whole life, not tonight." And 300 faces turned to the back of the ballroom, to the poor girl in the blue dress that had been her mother's, and Amara, with her chin up and her hands no longer shaking, began to walk forward through the parting crowd toward the light. Amara walked the whole length of that ballroom alone, and she did not hurry, and she did not look down. When she reached the stage and climbed the 3 steps, Tunde Adeyemi took her hand in his good hand and turned her to face the room, and he held her hand up beside his own, the billionaire and the waitress, and he said, "This is the honest one. I searched my whole hotel, and I found exactly one. Look at her well. Some of you walked past her every day for 3 years and saw nothing but a uniform. What happened to Funke and Mr. Coker did not happen with shouting. Tunde Adeyemi had buried his wife and survived 2 strokes, and he had no appetite left for drama. It happened quietly, the way real consequences usually do. Both of them were dismissed that same night. Their employment ended in front of the entire staff. The 4 million naira they had taken from the wages of people who could least afford to lose it was traced. Person by person, every cleaner and waiter and porter who had been quietly shorted, and every naira was to be repaid, with the hotel covering what could not be recovered from the 2 of them directly. The watch, and the deliberate framing of an innocent woman to cover a theft, was a criminal matter, and the hotel's lawyers handed the security footage to the police, and Funke Adebayo learned, in the weeks that followed, that the law moves slowly, but it does move, and that a thing done in the dark is still a thing, even after the lights come on. Mr. Coker, who had signed the payroll, faced his own reckoning with the authorities over the missing wages. Tunde did not gloat over any of it. When a reporter asked him that night whether he felt he had won, the old man looked tired and sad and said, "Nobody wins this kind of thing. 2 people threw away good lives for a watch, and a few thousand naira a month. That is not a victory. That is a waste. The only thing worth celebrating tonight is that the girl they tried to bury is standing in the light where she belongs. The rest is just cleaning up a mess." For Amara, the world turned over. Her name was cleared completely, publicly, in front of everyone who had heard it dragged through the mud. She was offered her job back, and more than her job. Tunde Adeyemi, who had built an empire and had no intention of letting it pass to people who measured human beings by their uniforms, asked her to train, with full pay, to one day help manage the staff she had once served beside, on one condition that he stated in front of the whole board: that she never, as long as she worked under that golden crown, stop treating the lowest person in the building exactly the way she had treated an old beggar on a bench. Chidi's examination fees were paid, not as charity, Tunde was careful to say, but as a scholarship from the hotel's foundation the very foundation he had been too lost in grief to run for over a year, and which Amara's kindness had in the end brought back to life. The boy wrote his examinations. He passed. He is at university now, studying to be a doctor, because of half a slice of bread given away in the rain by a sister who refused to close her hand. And the bench under the flame tree is still there. Tunde Adeyemi sits on it most mornings, stronger now, and most mornings Amara sits with him for a few minutes before her work begins, and they share a breakfast, the two of them, the way they did when each of them thought the other had nothing. Only now they both know better. Now they both know that neither of them ever had nothing. They each had the one thing the whole hard world could not take: the open hand. I want to step out of the story for a moment, because there is something here I cannot stop thinking about, and I suspect you cannot either. We have built a world that reads people the way Funke read Amara, by the uniform, by the salary, by the smell of the bus. We decide in half a second who is worth our patience and who is not, and almost always we decide it based on what a person can do for us. The waiter, the cleaner, the security man at the gate, the old woman selling oranges in traffic. We look right through them. We have all done it. I have done it. And if you are honest, so have you. And the quiet, frightening truth of a story like this is not that Tunde Adeyemi turned out to be a billionaire. That is the fairy tale part, the part that makes it satisfying to watch. The real truth is the part that is true in your life and mine, where the old man on the bench is just an old man on the bench, where the cleaner is just a cleaner, where there is no secret billionaire and no hidden camera and no public reveal coming to reward the kind and punish the cruel. In the real world, most kindness is never repaid, and most cruelty is never exposed, and the open hand mostly receives nothing back at all. So why keep it open? Amara answered that on the bench, before she knew any of what was coming, and I think her answer is the whole point. She said, because somebody should. Because one day it might be me on that bench, and I would want somebody to see me. She did not keep her hand open because she expected the man to be rich. She kept it open when she was certain he was poor. That is the only kind of kindness that actually counts for anything. The kind that expects nothing. The kind you give when you are sure no one important is watching, because the note being watched is exactly when it is real. There is a wage theft happening in the world that no auditor will ever find. It is the dignity we quietly take from people every day by treating them as less than us. And the lesson of Amara is not that being kind makes you rich. Sometimes it does not. It is that being kind is the one thing that makes you, no matter what happens, impossible to truly rob. They took her job, her name, her salary, her last hope. They could not touch the part of her that mattered. She walked out of that hotel with her chin up because the only thing that could have broken her was a thing she refused to give away. Treat the cleaner like a human being. Learn the name of the man at the gate. Give the half slice of bread when there is no camera, no reward, no chance of it ever coming back to you. Not because the old beggar might secretly own the building. He almost never does. But because of who you become in the giving. That is the only payment that is guaranteed, and it turns out to be the only one worth having. If this story moved you, do not leave in silence. Tell me in the comments, honestly, who is the person in your daily life that you walk past without really seeing? The one you could choose, starting tomorrow, to actually see? Write it down. And while you are there, tell me your city, and what time it is where you are watching from, and if a poor girl named Amara earned your respect tonight. Tap subscribe, so the next story can find you too. Keep your hand open. Somebody should.